Welcome to today's podcast interview. I brought on Danny Brassel. Danny, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Heather. More importantly, thanks for spreading some joy in the world and giving some knowledge that people can use.
Yes. Here's what I love about podcasting. Danny happens to be literally like 30 minutes from me, but it's so cool to connect with like-minded people and to find out you're in my backyard. For those that are new to you, please give a little background. Where do you live and what do you do?
Well, I live in now I live in Denver, Colorado. My mission is to bring joy back into education and the workplace.
Here's what I want to ask you, because your tagline, the idea of needing to bring back joy. Why are you so passionate about that? And why do you think people have lost that?
Yeah, I just think that there's a dialogue in this country that doesn't exist anymore because people label one another, and it's tearing the country apart, and that really bothers me. I actually love being around people that disagree with me. I think it's important to be around people that think differently than you, but you don't have to be disagreeable to disagree with a person. And so I want to encourage people to support debate, to support dialogue, but do it in a positive way.
Yeah. Okay, let's define joy. What does joy mean to you?
To me, joy, that's jumping out of bed, all excited every single day. It means getting lost in whatever you're doing. Maybe that's taking a walk with a loved one, or putting together a new funnel for your business, or maybe inspiring a kid to learn how to add. Joy is whatever you make it, and it's something that is in rare. It's a scarcity nowadays, so I'm trying to make it a little bit more abundant.
Well, and on that note, be the change you wish to see. You know what? I think this is super timely, and that's what I love about life synchronicities. Earlier this week, I posted on social media just asking a question: when is the last time you felt alive? And some of the responses were, it's been years. And the reason I bring that up is, I've been there, done that. That's what actually was the catalyst to change the trajectory of my life, that I was going through life's motions, same shit, different day, living in corporate, unfulfilled. And, a lot of people are stuck on that lack, scarcity, not enough mentality. And so I want to ask you on that note, because you shared with me before we started the call, the idea of abundance, that there's enough for all of us, not to focus on competition, but collaboration. So I'd love for you to expand on that. The abundance mindset.
Yeah, I'm around people all the time. I've been blessed with lots of wonderful mentors in my life. One of my mentors was a wonderful woman by the name of Barbara Scher, and we were talking off air beforehand. Because of Barbara, now when I'm stuck at a stoplight, I realize there's $1 million worth of vehicles surrounding me. There is so much abundance around us. Earl Nightingale said, "You are what you think about," and so that's why I always tell people, turn off the TV news and read a funny children's book. I can already tell you what's on the news tonight. The world is coming to an end, and whoever our leaders are doing a bad job. Read a funny children's book. You'll impress your friends. Yeah, I read a book cover to cover last night. Really? What was it about? It's about this little red hen. Amazing, amazing stuff. But I believe life's too short. And I have a philosophy. I take my job seriously. I don't take myself too seriously, because I ain't all that, and neither are you. And if you think you're all that, teach kindergarten for a week. Those little ones will set you straight. I mean, when I was teaching kindergarten, I had this little girl, LaShonda, raises her hand. I'm like, LaShonda, question. And she says, Miss Brassel, when are you going to trim your nose hair? I'm like, this afternoon. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, LaShonda. I'm all that. And that's what I miss about being around kids every single day, is they see the world in different ways. And if you're around people that think the way that you think, you're not growing. You're dying a little bit every single day. I think that's something we should be embracing in this country. You'll hear these arguments about diversity. I'm like, diversity is what makes America great. If we were all the same, COVID would have wiped us out. But we're all different.
Yeah.
And that's a great thing. It's great to be around people that are different. They push you to go further ahead.
Well, and think about children, right? They're not tainted, and well, not totally yet, but then that's when our subconscious mind is normally programmed up until age 7. But I remember my first coach that I invested in back in 2016, Dietz. I've had him on the podcast a couple times. I love Coach Dietz, Jersey guy, funny, passionate, but something he taught me was the need to be more childlike.
Mhm.
And I think that's what adults have forgotten, is that we've fallen trap into, one, a lot of people chasing the wrong thing or not even knowing what they want in life. But what does it mean to you, or how do you practice it being more childlike, having fun? Like you get to be here.
I love that, Heather. Gosh, you and I are on the same wavelength. Walt Whitman has a great quote. He said, "Be curious, not judgmental."
Mm.
And I love that. It's a great way to live your life. Is kids, they always ask why, and it drives me nuts when I hear adults just poo-poo kids' questions. My wife, one of the things that amazes me about her, she asks these basic questions, and they always dazzle me. I'm like, wow, I never even thought about that. When I was teaching, kids ask the most I mean, the two greatest questions I've ever been asked by a human being were asked by little kids. I had Maria, was 5 years old, one day raises her hand. She's like, Mr. Sal, where does it say Humpty Dumpty's an egg? And I laugh and I start reading the nursery rhyme and I stop and I'm like, it doesn't. Nowhere in that nursery rhyme does it say Humpty Dumpty's an egg. But every time you read the nursery rhyme, there's a picture of an egg. I'm like, how did I miss that all those times? Tyrell, 6 years old, raises his hand one day. He's like, Mr. Sal, is Curious George a monkey or an ape? And I laughed until I reread the book. What does the man in the yellow hat always call Curious George? My little monkey. Where's his tail? He doesn't have a tail because he ain't a monkey. He's a chimpanzee. I've read that book 3,000 times. I missed it every single time. Tyrell got it the very first time. That's why if I'm ever murdered, I want a first grader on the scene, not my wife. I mean, a first grader would be like, yeah, he's approximately 6 feet tall, dark jacket, dark pants. My wife would be like, I don't know. I think he's about this tall. I think he's white. You know, kids look at things a little bit different. I love being around people that think differently. From the very first mastermind I was in, by the afternoon, all of a sudden, I'm at a table and there's 8 billionaires at my table and me. And I'm like, oh, I'm at the wrong table because I'm just a former school teacher. And they all said, no, 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 stop, Danny. We all want you here. You give crazy ideas, but one of them is worth millions every single time. And I'm like, oh, that was interesting. And if you look at, there's so many different examples of this. Network television was that you always used to see this as whoever was in last place, all of a sudden they'd roll the dice because they were in last place and they'd take a whole bunch of chances and they would change their lineup and all of a sudden they'd go to first. I mean, I remember, ABC was number one. They had like Three's Company, Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. All the big hits were on ABC, and NBC was in distant third place. So what they do? They came up with NBC Thursdays, where they had like Cosby Show, Cheers, Family Ties, and Night Court, and they were number one forever. And then CBS is like, oh, we need to do something different. So all of a sudden they start doing, CSI and NCIS and NCIS Miami and CSI. I mean, it was crazy. It was like but that's what they did. And in order to innovate, they had to roll the dice a little bit. And that's what I love about working with a lot of entrepreneurs is I see people that are willing to take some risk. You and I were talking about this earlier is most people, they try and take the safe route. I think the safe route is probably the most dangerous route because the one thing that's guaranteed is change. And so the people that ride the change, the people that embrace it every single day are the people that are out there succeeding.
Okay, I have three notes on what you just shared that I'd like to touch on, like go further into depth on. The first one I want to talk about what you were sharing is the idea of our perception, our lens, because our perception is what's creating reality. And if we don't like the current results and circumstances, how important is it to change our perception?
Yeah, I mean, you see it right now. There's all kinds of research on this, and that social media kind of directs your attention towards how your thought patterns, and I think that's very dangerous. You don't want to be around a bunch of yes people. I mean, one of my favorite books was Team of Rivals by Doris Kearns Goodwin. It's about Abraham Lincoln. This is a true story. Is President Lincoln, when he became president, he took all of his political rivals and made them his cabinet. It's not an exaggeration to say the modern day equivalent would be Joe Biden making Donald Trump his Secretary of State. This is basically what Lincoln did. And all these guys hated Lincoln's guts. And by the time he was assassinated, they were all inconsolable. They're like, we've lost the world's greatest leader. I mean, Lincoln had one of my favorite quotes ever from a president. He said, I know the best way to defeat my enemies. I shall make them my friends.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a different type of thing. I want to be around people there. It was like when I read Long Walk to Freedom by Nelson Mandela, when he became the president of South Africa. I mean, he was imprisoned in South Africa for 27 years for a right that every American has. He criticized his government. So he spent 27 years in prison for this crime. When he got out and then he became president, all the whites are freaking out. They're like, uh-oh, here he comes. He's going to just take his vengeance out. So what did Mandela do? He created the Truth and Reconciliation Committee. This is a true story. Government policy. Any white that had killed a black during apartheid, if they appeared in front of the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, they had to confess to their crime, apologize to the family, and they were forgiven. This was the government policy. It sounds crazy, but a lot of people think that's why he was able to unite South Africa so quickly. It wasn't just because of the rugby game and Invictus. I mean, he was a pretty wise guy, but I'm like, wow, where's a where man, or you read about Gandhi. I'm like, Gandhi was able to defeat the British Empire without firing a shot.
Yeah.
Where did that guy get that? I mean, I want to look into, well, how do these people think this way? And so that's why I actually love being around people. My wife and I, we disagree on just about everything. She gets me thinking though all the time, and she makes me better for it. And that's what you want to do is you want to surround yourself with people that are push. I had a coach when I was in high school, a football coach, and he screamed at me all the time, and I was just going to quit. I was like, you know what? Screw this. This stinks. And he took me aside. He's like, the reason I yell at you all the time is I see your potential. If I
Yep.
didn't see it, I wouldn't even pay attention to you. And that really changed my entire mindset.
Yeah. To help you get out of your own way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something, the second point I wanted to talk on is the importance of our environment. I think we've all heard this saying, you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. But on that note, it goes way deeper. Normally, the circle you're a part of, you have the same habits, the same thinking, probably the same financial status. So if you don't like your current results, it may be necessary to change your environment. And like you said, the only constant is change, but a lot of people fear change. So how can, even in that point, how can we help people embrace change, to think bigger and put themselves in environments like you were at a table with billionaires?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I have a friend who's a veterinarian, and one day he asked me, Danny, how do you cure a sick fish? And I said, I don't know. How do you cure a sick fish? And he said, you change its tank. And I was like, oh, you change the environment. You stop hanging out with all those negative forces. The worst one's usually the voice in your mind.
Right.
By the way, I have I always compare. My wife grew up in Singapore in the most negative environment, people telling her entire life what she could not do. Compared to me, I have a photograph of me when I was 4 years old wearing space boots, a San Diego Charger jersey, a sheriff's badge, and a fireman's helmet because I was going to be the first ever astronaut, professional football player, police officer, and firefighter. That's the world I grew up in. And one of the reasons I became a teacher is I want everybody to see a world that way. Look at the possibilities. Stop limiting yourself.
Yeah, okay. We're going to go into further that in just a moment. The third thing I want to talk about, because I want to talk about possibilities, how to think bigger, because, especially when we get into quantum physics, quantum theory, and all of that, we have unlimited, infinite potential. Before we go there, the third thing I wanted to touch on is the need to, you shared a little bit about it, but you use the word innovate. The word or phrase I use with my coaching clients is creating version 2.0.
Mm.
Getting really clear on things you want to have, be, do, and experience, but understanding who you would need to become to have those, aka innovate, think bigger, change who you are. So what do you mean by that on a personal level?
So I've been blessed with lots of wonderful coaches. Two of my favorite coaches are Rob and Steve Schallenberger. Steve has a best-selling book called Becoming Your Best. He helped Stephen Covey come up with the Franklin Covey Planner, and he has a 12-step program. It's not for alcoholics; it's for people interested in improving themselves. And number 8 in the steps is innovate through imagination. And I just believe all of us are limiting ourselves all the time. You have to expand your belief system all the time. I used to share with people. There's this great report card from 5th grade from this kid's 5th grade teacher. It said, "Oh, if Jay spent half as much time studying as he did trying to be a comedian, he'd be a real success in life. And it was Jay Leno's fifth grade report card. When the teacher was ignoring that this kid, this is his skill. That's kind of, I'm a little bit different than a lot of educators. I'm always kind of pushing the system. I always really encourage my students to say why. Ask why all the time. I mean, I started off as a history teacher, and I always loved teaching history because the first thing I teach is history books are usually written by the winners. Every event in history has multiple points of view. My job as your teacher is to encourage you to how to think, not what to think. I mean, this is the problem I see in America is we're telling people what to think. I'm like, but that doesn't encourage critical thinking. You are your own person, and thank God people think differently. It's usually the innovations that we're talking about. They come from those people that think differently. I mean, I haven't read the Walter Isaacson biography on Elon Musk, but I read the original one by Ashley Vance. And there were two stories that cracked me up in that book. One was Elon Musk is with his biographer at a Mexican restaurant, and he has a new girlfriend. And he asked the biographer, he's like, I'm considering allocating 8.25 hours per week to her. Is that sufficient? Who talks like that? That's like Spock talking about a date. But then the other story that I thought was fascinating was he used to always question his engineers on the floor at SpaceX. These guys were starting to get irritated. Like, man, I've already been interviewed. I got the job. Why is he interviewing me again? But then they started comparing notes with one another. They're like, wait a second. He's listening to our answers. He's learning. And we think he actually understands it better than we do now. And I'm like, wow, that's a guy. That's why, I mean, he's kind of fallen off the rails lately because he's off his mission. His mission, he believes, is he wants to save humankind. That's why he's looking at how to colonize Mars and things like that. He's gone off mission. This is where a lot of people make their mistake, is now he's like, oh, I'm an advocate for free speech. Unless somebody criticizes me, then I'm going to sue them. I'm like, well, that's problematic. It's not on his mission. But when he was on mission, he created 4 separate billion-dollar companies, SpaceX, he worked with PayPal, Solar City. And then, I mean, I have a Tesla. I've never been interested in cars in my entire life, and I love my Tesla. I think it's the most amazing thing I'm like, I'm driving a computer. This is not an automobile. It's completely different. But I love that there's a person like him thinking different. When you were talking earlier about there's so many people that are miserable out there, I really encourage everybody, if they haven't watched the Steve Jobs commencement speech at Stanford, it's only 15 minutes long, and it's one of the greatest speeches I've ever seen in 15 minutes. One of the things he says in that speech is throughout his life, he'd always stare at the mirror, and if he found himself not excited about the day, if he did that after a couple of days, he realized he needed to quit what he was doing and do something entirely different. I'm like, wow, that's a lot of wisdom there. Is if you're one of these people that it's like the Dunkin' Donuts guy from the commercials in the 80s. This is dating me, much older than you, Heather. But there used to be the guys like, oh, it's time to make the donuts. And then he's like, I made the donuts. And it's the same guy. He's like, all he's doing is making the donuts all the time. He's miserable. How many people around us are like that all the time? I'm like, man, there's no life in you. You were born for greatness, man.
Yeah.
Go out and do it. I love people that look at their second. I was just watching a documentary on Gil Garcetti. Gil Garcetti was the district attorney in charge of the OJ case. And after the OJ case, he quit his job as the district attorney. And now he's like a world famous photographer. I'm like, wow. That's crazy. He's a completely different field. I'm like, good for him. I just thought that was fascinating. I like this. I'm always looking at who are the people that look comfortable with themselves. These are people that they're pursuing the things that they were meant to pursue.
What you're bringing to mind, what you just shared there, because we were talking about the idea of like innovation. The word I just wrote down is to reinvent yourself. And those are some stories you shared. But as an example, I don't know if you watched, I'm pretty sure it was on Netflix, but Arnold Schwarzenegger. So the Arnold docu-series, I think there were only 3 episodes, but here's what I love about Arnold and why I watch those kind of things. I definitely watch a lot of endurance athletes. I want to understand their mindset. Anybody, the GOATs, right? Tom Brady's and those kind of guys, Phil Mickelson, they talk about visualization. They have clarity. They're mentally rehearsing how they want things to play out. But Arnold, what I love about Arnold, because he, at a young age, we're talking in high school, he got really clear on wanting to be a bodybuilder and he excelled in that. Then he reinvented himself and he wanted to be not a Hollywood actor, but a star. Like he was very clear to be a star. And then he excelled in that. Then he reinvented himself again and went into politics. So my point is, if you're in that rut, what I call autopilot, that same shit, different day monotony, which is not what we're here for, right? We're here for extraordinary life if we step into that. Can we talk about the idea of reinventing yourself? What does that mean?
Yeah, Schwarzenegger has one of my favorite quotes of all time. He says, "Money doesn't buy happiness." He's like, "I'm now worth $50 million, but I was just as happy when I only had $48 million." That is great. When he was governor, I'd vote for that guy for anything, by the way. When he was governor of California, it's just like in Colorado, there's road construction projects all the time that take years and years. And he made a deal with Caltrans, the road construction people. He said, "Okay, we're going to prioritize projects. For every project you complete within the next 48 hours, I'll give you a $10 million bonus." Oh, Heather, you'd be amazed how productive the Caltrans system was within the next 48 hours. And it just shows you people just need a kick in the butt sometimes. It's in there. It's always, it's Michelangelo with David. He said David was in the stone all the time. I just made him appear. He was always there. I'm like,
Mm.
gosh, I love people that see that. I mean, that's what it gets me excited about teachers is when I became a teacher because I realized Oprah had a teacher that inspired her. I want to be that person that inspires the next Supreme Court justice, the next president, or the next really good parent. Was they remember something that I used to do that inspired them? That's where the innovation comes from. Is how do you get people thinking a little bit differently to adjust their mindset?
Okay. On that note, I want to talk about the next topic we touched on, but the idea of breaking free from all these, we're limiting ourselves. And a phrase I use all the time, especially on LinkedIn, is the idea of getting out of your own way. And that phrase comes out of people's mouths. They know they're self-sabotaging and they keep doing it. So what advice can you share on breaking free of these cycles and stepping into your full potential?
Yeah, President Eisenhower, also General Eisenhower, once said, "Pessimism never won any battles." That's exactly right. Start looking at the possibilities. Stop looking at all the obstacles. Netflix today is not what Netflix was 30 years ago. Reed Hastings did not look at all the obstacles. He's like, "Oh, I'll mail people these DVDs in the mail." He's like, "Oh, I'll make it a better mailer." And it became, "Oh, we'll stream it." I mean, it's changing. He's changed. We talk about that version 2.0, version 3.0. I mean, how many things they look different. I look at my speaking materials from 10 years ago and they make me laugh. Actually, they freak me out. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's pathetic. I can't believe anybody hired me." But the fact is, they did hire me. And the reason they hired me was because I was putting it out there. It wasn't perfect. Perfect is the enemy of progress. And that's what people have to pay attention to is just get yourself out there. You'll get a lot better. I mean, this is what you and I agree on is if you want to get better, you hire a coach. Last year was December 15th. I finally made a decision. I'm going to hire a nutritionist. And so I hired the most wonderful nutritionist, Dr. Ethan Lazarus. The first day I met him, I'm like, "Oh, that's perfect, Dr. Lazarus. You're going to help me rise from the dead." And in 1 year's time, I had to go, I had to be accountable to him every couple of weeks. I always called it my fat tax. He's like, "It's not a fat tax, it's an investment." But he changed my mindset. He's like, "Danny, let's stop thinking about losing weight. Let's start thinking about gaining years."
Mm,
Mindset change. I was like, that was
yes.
interesting. And I've lost 40 pounds in 1 year. And he said, "Don't think about it as losing 40 pounds. You got 15% return on your investment so far in just 1 year." He's like, "You're doing really well." And I was like, wow, I love it. He's got me to, but I had to hire him. That's what he was good at. My wife asked me to fix the toilet a couple of months ago, and I did. I called a plumber, and she's like, "I didn't tell you to call a plumber. I told you to fix the toilet." I said, "I did fix the toilet. I called a plumber. I called an expert."
Yeah.
She's like, "He charges a lot." I'm like, "I charge a lot. I'm really good at helping people create better speeches, make them funny and engaging. I get paid a lot of money for that because that's my expertise. This guy, he's really good at fixing toilets, so I paid him for his expertise. There's no
Right.
way I'm going to waste my time on something that there's a better person that I can just pay them to do that. That's how the economy works, is all of us have our expertise. And that's what I encourage all your listeners to think about is, what are you an expert at? And maybe it's just, every Academy Award winning Best Picture. I mean, well, that's a start. Let's figure out how we can monetize that expertise. Believe me, there's a way to monetize anything. I speak to organizations. It's amazing how many different organizations exist for just weird niches. I'm like, man, and I'm not going to name them because it would probably insult them, but it's like, I'm sure that there's an association for plumbers who like to ride horses on the weekends. I'm sure there's an association for people there's an association for everybody. I was just listening to a speaker and she's like, oh, I can't get any gigs because there's nobody out. I'm like, there's a zillion people out there looking for a speaker if you're good. I'm sorry, I got off on a tangent again.
No, but I think what you shared, and it's important, like on that nutritionist you hired, it's a mindset shift. When you change your perception, when you stop, we're blinding ourselves by not looking at the whole picture of what's truly available to us. So a question I have for you, since we're talking about abundance mindset and to stop limiting ourselves, do you have any tactical strategies or, practical tools that somebody could use to think bigger in goal setting? I think I posted it this week and I don't know who actually said it, but to set goals that scare you and excite you at the same time.
Well, I mean, I just saw a social media post yesterday on Instagram from Justin Thomas, a golfer I really admire, and it showed his goals for 2023. And it was a list of about, I don't think it was 10 goals. I think it was like maybe 8 goals. He wanted to win 3 tournaments. He wanted to be ranked #1 in the world. He wanted to make the Ryder Cup and win it. He wanted to win a major. It was fascinating. He didn't hit any of the goals except for he made the Ryder Cup team, but they didn't win it. So out of like 8 goals, he's sharing with everybody. He's like, I didn't make any of them. And I loved that he shared that.
Yeah.
Great. I'm like, yeah, I mean, it's the story of the 2 guys are selling insurance, and the one guy, he sets a goal, he's going to make $100,000 this year, and the other guy, he sets a goal, he's going to make $1 million this year, and the guy that set the goal, he's going to make $100,000, he makes $100,000. The guy who sets the goal for $1 million, he only makes $500,000, and the one guy's bragging, I hit my goal, and the other guy's like, oh, I didn't hit my goal, but he made 5 times more than the guy that set the low goal. How many of us are setting goals that are way too low? I mean, Michelangelo said the greater danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that it is too low and we reach it. How many of us are setting low goals? And you and I were talking about this earlier. We didn't talk specifically about this, but you said you don't believe in coincidence. I'm like, I don't either. One of my favorite podcasts is How I Built This with Guy Raz. And at the end of his podcast, he always asks, well, how much of this do you think was based on luck? And how much do you think was based on hard work? And for me, if I was ever on that show, definitely hard work is part of the equation. Luck isn't any of the equation. To me, it's providence. People are looking out. There's a God that's looking out for me. You get back from the world whatever you're putting out to the world. One of my favorite speakers, Joe Martin, good friend. Joe, he calls it napkin leadership. He says, when you go to a restaurant, and they give you a napkin, is your first impulse to stuff the napkin down your shirt and wait for others to serve you, or is it to put it over your forearm and to serve others? I've never liked the term servant leadership because I'm like, by definition, all leaders are servants. All leaders are about their people before themselves. And again, I'm going off on a tangent, but I get very passionate about this. I just see so many people that they're feeling Americans are the worst. They're entitled on everything. I mean, this is why I wish everybody would travel abroad. 2 things happen when you travel abroad. You get a better perspective of the rest of the world, and you stop griping about the things we take for granted every single day in this country.
I 100% agree with that. I want to highlight something you shared though on the Justin Thomas example, the golfer, and even those 2 insurance guys wanting to make 100 grand and $1 million. The point was, and whether or not Justin Thomas quote succeeded, he was clear on goals and he wrote them down. I would just like to share something, and I already did it for 2024, but for 2023, I wrote out what I call a manifesto. It's also called scripting, but I wrote in past tense, things that I desire as though they already happened. And I remind myself often of what I want, like what I'm moving towards. And then I was able to look back at the year and go, holy, like this stuff happened. Look at all these things happened. And the point of that for me is building confidence and belief when I get clear and I show up for myself every single day, what's possible. And now for 2024, it's time to think bigger. It's time to think bigger.
I love that, Heather. And that's what a goal is, a dream with a deadline. Most people, they have their dreams, their desires, but they don't have specific actions that they're going to. We talked about this
Yeah.
on camera, is that, when I was a teacher, whether I was teaching my little ones or my older ones, as they exited my classroom for the day, they always had to hear me say the same refrain. I'd always say, remember, kids, education is valuable, but execution is priceless. Knowledge is not power. Only applied knowledge is power. Knowing what the right thing to do and doing the right thing are two very different things. Go out, do the right thing, and let's make this world a better place. The kids,
Yeah.
this is something I have to hear. But again, I'm a big believer in this. I grew up in an environment, when I finally stopped teaching, I was at a party with my mom and my high school English teacher, and they didn't know I was listening to their conversation. And my high school English teacher told my mom, she's like, "Oh, it's such a shame that Danny stopped teaching. He was such a fantastic teacher." And my mom replied, "But Danny's great at everything he does." I mean, Heather, that's the environment I grew up in,
Yeah.
is being encouraged all the time. I think that's a lot of my mission with the joy. Is I just think a lot of people just need a little bit of encouragement. A lot of people,
Yeah.
they're feeling down out there. And I mean, there's a lot of people listening to this podcast right now. They're thinking, man, I can't do it. I was giving a speech in India to this school, 5,000 kids. And at the end of the speech, everybody, they're just great. The kids were wonderful. And all of a sudden, I'm looking at this 6-year-old boy. He's got tears in his eyes. And I look and he's missing his left arm. He's got like a stump, and he's crying, and he says, "How can I succeed, Dr. Danny?" And so I crouch down, I get to his eye level. I say, "You know what? When I was a little kid, I went to 18 different schools before I was in 6th grade. The kids and even some of the teachers, they called me stupid because I stuttered. And eventually I went to a school, and a teacher spotted me, and she would work with me one on one. She'd sing things to me. And I found when I sang back, I didn't have my stutter. It's kind of like the movie The King's Speech. Eventually I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But I looked at that little boy and I said, isn't it interesting that the little boy everybody made fun of because he couldn't speak right now gets paid ridiculous sums of money to travel the world to do what? To
Speak.
speak. And
Yeah.
he had the biggest grin on his face. I'm like, don't let anybody ever tell you what you cannot do.
Mm.
And this is what I always told my students. I'm like, you know what? Sometimes you need somebody else to believe in you before you believe in yourself. I believe in all of you. They only give me the best and the brightest. Now let's go out and let's make this world a better place. People need to hear that all the time. And I'll tell you right now, and I know your audience, they should be talking to you about this, Heather, is like, work with Heather. She's a coach. She's going to encourage you. Sometimes you need that gasoline. Sometimes you're running on empty. You just need another person to say, hey, you're going to be all right. So many people, they quit. They quit way too early. They're so close and they just quit. I'm like, oh, you were almost there. You
Yeah.
almost made it. I mean, gosh, this is the lesson. Never quit. You never lose if you quit. If you never quit, excuse me, you never lose if you never quit.
Yes. Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. And seriously, on that note, I was having a conversation with somebody last night about the a story being 3 feet from gold.
Yeah.
Just like you're sharing, most people quit just before the breakthrough. So I love that, to persevere. Here's what I want to ask you, because we touched on a lot of different things today. What do you believe is a key takeaway you want listeners to get?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think this is something that's been kind of a theme throughout our conversation today is if you don't know how to do something, hire a coach. Whether if you want to get in shape, well, hire somebody that knows how to get in shape. I don't one of my mentors, Zig Ziglar, he used to say, if you want to get in shape, you don't go to a fat doctor who tells you to lose weight. You go to a thin doctor. Yeah, that person knows how to lose the weight. I laugh at it because I'm like, he's absolutely right. I want to look at somebody that's done it and been there. I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, and I felt bad because I was kind of making fun of the other speakers, but every single speaker said, enjoy the journey, enjoy the journey. And I got up there, I'm like, you know, don't enjoy the journey sucks. I mean, when you're in the journey and you're like, man, I can't make my rent. I'm really enjoying this journey. No, you don't enjoy the journey. The journey stinks. But it is a process. I
Yeah.
mean, Tony Robbins says that. His definition of happiness, I really like his definition of happiness is progress. You just need to be, and don't, Theodore Roosevelt said, comparison is a thief of joy. Don't compare yourself to anybody else. Compare yourself to you yesterday. Are you better today than you were yesterday? Your audience, if they're listening to this podcast, they're a little bit better after they listen to the podcast. It's baby steps. This is how you develop habits. The people that succeed, they don't do glory. I always tell people resolutions never work. Most people quit all their New Year's resolutions by January 15th. The people that succeed are the people that do the work. They do
Yep.
the work. I mean, John Neighbor, he was on the 1972 Olympic swim team, and he realized if he wanted to win the gold medal in the geez, I'm losing all my language today. Backstroke. He did the backstroke. He said he needed to cut 4 seconds off of his time for the backstroke. And he's like, oh my gosh, 4 seconds by the 1976 Olympics. But what he did is he's like, okay, 4 seconds. Right now it's 1972. That means every year I have to cut 1 second, which means every month I have to cut off almost a tenth of a second, which means every day I have to cut off about, he broke it down, and it
Yeah.
was fascinating because in 1976, he became the first swimmer to win 3 gold medals on the same day. And he set the Olympic record with the exact time that he said he needed to get in 1976. But it didn't
Love
happen in
that.
1976. It happened every day at the pool. Everybody loves to look at Michael Phelps. This is a current day example. 29 medals, 23 gold medals. Everybody's like, wow, that's amazing. That guy never missed a day of training for 10 years. He did at least 10,000 meters in the pool every single day when he had the flu, when it was Christmas, when every single day he did the work. So now I'm actually forgetting what the question was. I guess, it was the themes of the show. So the themes of the show are you need to get a coach, you need to do the work. And important, really important, you need to believe in yourself, and you need
Mhm.
to surround yourself with other people that are lifting you up, not putting you down.
Yeah.
You need to simplify your life. The way you simplify, you don't you don't hit the goal in one day. Justin Thomas, those goals he missed in 2023, I guarantee you he's making goals like that in 2024. The people that succeed, they set those goals and then they do the work. And Justin Thomas also hires coaches. He has his head coach, his psychological coach. He has his swing coach. He has a putting coach. He has a driving coach. You find people that are gifted, and maybe if you don't have the money, there's this great government institution in almost every community. They got if you go, they got these buildings. They got rows and rows of books, and I found out that all you have to do is apply for a card. It's free, and they'll let you take those books home. They're called public libraries,
Yeah.
and they're also electronic. And there's amazing knowledge out there. Some of my mentors I've never met in my life. Abraham Lincoln is a wonderful mentor to me. I never met Abraham Lincoln, but I can learn from him. Mother Teresa is an amazing mentor. Never met her, but I can learn from her because I know how to read. And if you don't know how to read or you're dyslexic, listen to the Audible book. It's just as effective as doing it on your own. So again, that was a very long answer to a short question, but that's what I want people to get out of this is, this podcast is all about encouragement. There's a lot of us that are stuck. The way you get unstuck is you change the routine.
Nailed it. I love that. For time's sake, I think we could talk for days, but
Yeah.
I'd love to wrap up the interview. And so I have a couple rapid fire questions for
All
you.
right. All right. Here we go.
Now, I consider myself a walking quote book, but you definitely topped me. So this question, what is a quote or motto that you live by?
Well, I have to show my humorous side. So my favorite quote of all time comes from the very important film Blazing Saddles, Mel Brooks, in which Alex Karras plays a character named Mongo. And Mongo's like an imbecile, but he has his deep moment. He says, Mongo, only pawn in game of life. So I always have loved that quote. I think that's fantastic. That's probably my favorite quote of all time. It's a very basic quote.
Final question. What advice would you give your younger self?
Wow, that's a good one. I guess you're going to be okay.
Mhm.
Like, it was either Socrates or Bobby McFerrin who once said, "Don't worry, be happy." So maybe that's it. Don't worry, be happy.
I love that and such a great reminder. Danny, thank you so much for joining me and having this conversation.
Heather, thanks for all that you do, and thank you for being such a gift to bring me today, Heather. And I just love your podcast and everything you're doing for your audience. Keep on doing it.